All right, so welcome back everybody to our latest episode of The Nest. Before we begin today's episode, we would like to send our thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of legend Bill Russell, who passed away today at the age of 88. Russell won 11 championships with the Boston Celtics, and he also won 5 MVPs, and the NBA Finals MVP is named after him. So he just made an incredible impact overall to the game of basketball, and especially to the Boston Celtics organization, and he will be greatly missed for sure. Does anyone else have any words they'd like to share about Bill Russell?
Yeah, just a legend through and through. I mean, not just for the Boston area and for the Celtics. I mean, he had a vast contribution to the Celtics, to the number of titles that the Celtics have, and the fact that the fact they're tied right now with the Lakers for the most titles. I mean, Bill Russell had a huge part in that, but not just for the Celtics overall, but for the game itself, right? I mean, he played during a time when the game was very different and the game was evolving, and he was a trailblazer and really like and moving the game forward. I mean, his career in the NBA and of course before that, the ABA, of course. He's just contributed so much to the game. It's really hard to put all that into words. Just a legend. There's really no other way to describe it. And he's gonna. I mean, his absence is gonna lead to a giant void in the game. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Bill Russell.
Yeah, and just to add on that, my brother and I actually had the pleasure of meeting Bill Russell in 2007 when he came to a book signing in Acton, Massachusetts, and yeah, he was just a tremendously classy person. The whole event went until like 2 or 3 in the morning, just because he actually made it a point to like spend a few minutes talking to every single person he signed an autograph for. Like we're used to a lot of book signings where they sign the book, you smile for a photo and leave, but he actually made a point to talk to every single person, including my brother and I. Just a really, really classy guy. And also we can't talk about Bill without also mentioning all his contributions to the civil rights movement of the mid 20th century. An absolute icon in that as well. Along with other people like Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend. So he made a huge contribution, especially he was playing in Boston at a time when there was a lot of conflict about integration in society, and he went through a lot for that, and really he persevered and succeeded, and really kept his identity, and just was really an icon again for really people everywhere, not only in sports but also in civil rights. So yeah, Bill Russell, just a tremendous larger than life person, and left his mark really on our entire society. So he'll be greatly missed for that.
Yeah, I gotta echo the sentiment of everyone on here. Such a trailblazer in terms of basketball, as Anirban mentioned, his numerous contributions to civil rights, being the first Black coach in the NBA, and holding the institutions even in his home city accountable. Not he one interesting story related to the Red Sox is that he refused to walk into Fenway Park until they addressed some of their until the management addressed their history of racism. So I was just an incredible player, very team focused player too. So yeah, he's going to be greatly missed.
Yeah, most definitely. I think he was one of the reasons that we now have the Bill Russell NBA Finals MVP award. So like he's had a massive impact on the game of basketball from the time he's played, and here we are in 2022, and his impact is still greatly it's still great in today's game. Just the same thing with Kobe Bryant. Even though they're two different eras, they have the massive impact on the game and how we play the game today.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you everyone for your words. I mean, I think all of us can say that as great a player as Bill Russell was, and he was a dominant, one of the greatest NBA players ever, he was an even better person. And that really says something. When you are a Hall of Famer and 11 championships and everything he has accomplished, he was an even better person on top of that. Like, just an absolute loss for the whole NBA community and just for all of us today. So he will be missed. As for our show today, we will once again be going back to the format from 2 weeks ago. So that was with just Rohan and I, and we discussed 10 topics with 3 minutes per topic. As you can see, we have 5 people today, and just quickly introducing everyone, Rohan Venkatesh, Anirban Chakraborty, Ujan Talukdar, and Ravi Bajpai. Glad to have all of you back. It's been a while since all of us were on the show, and we are just very thankful that you were all able to join us today from our busy schedules.
It's good to have the panel back.
Thank you for
Full
coming
panel.
on. Yeah, so, oh, go on, Ujan.
I'm just saying it's good to be back. Thanks for having us back.
All right, sounds good. So since we have 5 people today, 3 minutes is not going to do justice at all. So we are going to have 15 minutes per topic, but we're going to be discussing 3 topics today. So the topics are going to be the Kevin Durant and Jaylen Brown trade rumors. We're going to talk about the Kyler Murray contract situation a bit, and then we'll also talk about the Major League Baseball trade deadline, which is coming up on August 2nd. So Tuesday, yeah, in 2 days. So, all right, let's just talk about this then first. Let's talk about the report back on Monday. And yes, we will also just want to give a shout out to David Ortiz again. Forgot about that. Congratulations to Big Papi on officially being inducted to the Hall of Fame. I mean, 3
Big Papi in Cooperstown.
The Red Sox helped break the 86-year-old curse of the Bambino in 2004 and 2013 World Series MVP. I mean, just a dominant player, always had the clutch gene.
Now that's a legend I had the fortune of being, that we all had the fortune of being able to grow up watching. So I mean, the fact that we saw him play and now he's in the Hall of Fame, I mean, that's just this is a big deal. It's definitely a big deal to say the least.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think all of us were kind of fortunate. Like growing up in Boston, we've seen so many legends: Tom Brady,
he's basically
David Ortiz,
the king of clutch.
Manny Ramirez, so many like great players throughout all our like sports history, right? So Boston has such a great sports history, and this just reinforces that. David Ortiz in the Hall of Fame, Tom Brady's still playing today. Bill Russell made such a major impact to the game overall. Actually, just one other note.
Tom Brady, who turns 45 in a few days.
Actually, one other note, Bill Russell in the 4 major sports, NBA, NHL, MLB, and NFL, most championships as a player among those 4 major sports. That is just remarkable. So that is just amazing altogether. I mean, Boston has just been blessed to have so many great dominant athletes in its sports history for sure. So yeah, so let's just begin by talking about the Celtics and Kevin Durant, and I don't know, let's just talk about this because this is kind of like a big topic now. I think it happened on Monday when the Celtics offered Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a draft pick to the Brooklyn Nets for Kevin Durant, and the Nets actually said no, and they wanted Marcus Smart as well. And that's, I guess, where the Celtics officially kind of stopped with the negotiations. So I don't know. I mean, then Jaylen Brown also tweeted out SMH, short for shaking my head. So I don't know. Let's just talk about this. Like, what's going on? And do you think that we could see Kevin Durant at TD Garden next season?
I think that this was just like poor negotiation by the Celtics, right? I mean, even if you are going to give up or even give up a lot, I'm not sure why the Celtics went right out of the gate and offered this much, right? For one player, you're offering. I mean, granted, it's a star player, but you're granting like pretty much a very good player on your team and a pretty good role player on your team in Derek White, that and a draft pick, all for one guy. And this is happening right out of the gate. And not only that, I mean, the Nets basically decide to stick their thumbs in the Celtics' faces by asking for more and asking for Marcus Smart. So on one hand, the Celtics are basically saying, here, Nets, take whatever you want. Just give us KD, please. We want KD. And the Nets are like, yeah, give us more. I just think that it puts the Celtics in a really weak negotiating position, and it's borderline humiliating to say the least. I mean, if anything, I think the Celtics should have driven a tougher bargain. And if you don't get KD, I mean, so be it. In fact, I mean, I was never really in favor of getting KD in the first place. If you've seen like previous episodes, but just the way that they're like that they just went out of their way to basically just fawn over KD and say, oh my God, just please give us KD. Like we'll give you anything. It's just pathetic. Really, just absolutely pathetic.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you on there, Rohan. I think that the Celtics did an okay job with the trade deadline. However, before I say anything, I want to preface this. The leak of this whole thing, the timing of this whole thing is, in my mind, undoubtedly the Nets trying to create a trade market. I think the trade market is completely dried up. These negotiations, if you listen to what people are saying, were from a while ago, and they're just desperate to create some buzz, get back in the news, show off that that people are interested in him. When in reality, I think the market is kind of dead right now.
But
So
why would they do that? Why would the Nets do that unless they legitimately feel that they can deal Kevin Durant and get something, get a lot in return? I mean, which begs the question: like, would there be other suitors who'd be willing to give up even more than the Celtics purportedly offered to give? Like, I can't confirm any of that, but it's just a question that pops up in my mind when I hear something like this.
So Rohan, I think definitely there are suitors who would give up more than our initial offer. I would also say this in my opinion. I think that would be a good trade for the Celtics in what we're offering up. You know, Kevin Durant's under contract for many years, and I think that giving up Brown, Derek White, and a pick, that's really not that much in the grand scheme of things. I think that if you take Kevin Durant, you put him on team, you throw him back against the Warriors again, with this trade, we would win that finals. I think Durant is just that much of a great player. And I think this trade that we've offered them is very reminiscent of the Kawhi Leonard, DeMar DeRozan trade that won the Warriors their championship. I misspoke. Raptors their championship. You know, giving up a very talented young player for one of the best players in the NBA for a short period of time, just to completely bet it all. And I think that the Raptors, you know, really succeed in that move. And I think the Celtics could benefit from a trade like that. So, however,
but even then, how many years does KD have left, right?
I would not do that. The Nets counteroffer was terrible. I'm glad we're not doing that trade. You know, adding Marcus Smart is too much. But I think the way that the Celtics handled the negotiations was okay. And I think that the Nets are just getting desperate now. So.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, I think we also have to keep in mind that it's not even necessarily true that the Nets really want to move him on, because you remember, I mean, at the end of the day, the Nets just have all the leverage when it comes to the situation. They have 4 years on the contract. If they really want, they can just tell Kevin, you know, we're not going to trade you at all, so you better play for us, or you're just going to sit on the bench for 4 years. That's it. So I mean, I've definitely seen some pretty credible some credible hypotheses that really they're just setting an impossible asking price, because let's face it, like no one's going to give up two of their starters to get Kevin Durant, because you're just back to where you started in terms of your net talent as a team. So if it's just me, I honestly don't even think the Nets are serious about it. I think they want to keep Kevin Durant, and they're just kind of making these little gestures. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to stay in Brooklyn. But to add to to kind of talk on this point, you know, I'm really not a fan of this trade. I think, you know, as a fan of the Celtics, I think something that really draws me to them is really kind of the feeling of like a homegrown team. Like when we have in the finals, we have 4 out of our 5 starters all drafted from the Celtics, all here for like 5-6 years. I mean, I think part of having a sports team is that kind of culture and that community, and I feel like that's really difficult to replace. And honestly, like it's one thing if we're like a team like, I don't know, like the Kings or something, who you know really would need some kind of massive overhaul to do something in the playoffs. But we just made it to the finals. We discovered a chemistry that works after, I mean, 4 or 5 years of trades that didn't really quite do us the service that we thought they would. So in that case, you know, I think it's something that we shouldn't take for granted, that we're pretty lucky to have a team like this, where where we have a good enough team to reach the finals, and it's still a young team, and still, you know, we have people like Jaylen Brown, who's clearly really invested in the community in Boston. He was in my opinion, I mean, I think he's pretty fair to say he was our best player in the finals last season. So I think that's something that comes with it. You know, if you were to ask me, like, would I rather win like Toronto did in 1 year and sacrifice all of that for Boston, I'd probably say I'd really just like to see this team and what it can do, because when this team actually is able to accomplish something, it'll feel that much sweeter, rather than us having to go out into the market and get Kevin Durant and really, in my opinion, lose a big piece of our culture.
And not only that, if this KD trade were to come through and the Celtics still don't win, it would just look even worse. I would say that it adds that additional risk.
I just think the other thing is, right, I think about the Kyrie Irving trade from 2017, and we had obviously Kyrie Irving as the point guard, then young Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and eventually Gordon Hayward came in for like 2018, right? Because 2017 he was injured. But like you had all these star players, and like it just didn't really work out. If I just feel like if you had Kevin Durant, it would kind of be the same thing. You know, you have Kevin Durant, you have a star in Jason Tatum now, so you essentially now have two stars, right? You would at least, and then but you're giving up like so much of your bench. Remember, they traded like 5 like end of bench players just to get Malcolm Brogdon. So I just don't really. I just feel like why are you going to trade so many more players when you just reached the NBA Finals? You want to keep the team chemistry high, and I think the more they trade, the lower the chemistry goes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in this approach, like in this situation, the run it back approach is the correct situation. Sometimes we're hesitant to do that with teams. Like we've seen the Bruins kind of do that over and over again, but I think this is different because this Celtics team, as all of us know, they just reached the NBA Finals. They won 2 games. They were up 2-1, and they had a good shot at going up 3-1 until they sort of fell apart in the fourth quarter of Game 4. So they were very, very close to an NBA championship this season. And I think overall, like as the Nearbon said, I think there's a sense of like kind of pride that comes with it if the Celtics sort of win with this current roster situation, right? With Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams III, and then they of course signed Al Horford and traded for him again, so they had him twice. But I think overall there's a sense of pride that comes with the Celtics if you're able to win with homegrown talent. That's sort of what the Warriors did this past season and in 2015 pre Kevin Durant. So I think there's that situation. And also just about the Brooklyn Nets situation, I think what's kind of happened is the Minnesota Timberwolves, they made a trade with the Utah Jazz to get Rudy Gobert, and they actually gave up 5 first-round picks. Now, Rudy Gobert is a tremendous player, but Kevin Durant, all of us can know this. He's much better than Rudy Gobert. So Rudy Gobert is asking, the situation where Rudy Gobert is getting 5 first-round picks, the situation to get Kevin Durant is probably going to be like 6, 7, 8 first-round picks. It's going to be like something unreasonable for any contending team to want to do, right? And just before we can also look at the Brooklyn Nets situation too. Remember in 2013 when they traded and got Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Jason Terry, and they pretty much gave the Celtics their first-round picks, which ended up leading to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. That's sort of the situation the Celtics don't want to have, right? So I completely am okay with them not pursuing this Kevin Durant trade. I've also been on the record. I feel like at this point, like your team just beat Kevin Durant's team this past season. You swept them. You humiliated the Brooklyn Nets this past postseason. So why do you really want Kevin Durant at this point? You don't need Kevin Durant. You just need to improve on your turnovers, and you've already improved your roster overall. I don't think the key to this team is just trying to add Kevin Durant and replacing key components.
Which only adds more salt to this because, like, given that the Celtics should have been the ones with all the leverage. Instead, I think they just gave it all away to the Nets.
I don't think they really gave any leverage, right? I mean, they just potentially were seeing what do you want for Kevin Durant. And probably, I mean, honestly, I don't think the Nets are really like serious about moving on from Kevin Durant either. I'm reading reports now that Kyrie Irving is also starting to open up to returning to Brooklyn. Though, of course, knowing Kyrie Irving, we never know what's going to be the situation with him in a given day because
maybe he'll end up with the Kings. Who knows?
That would be really funny. Him and Kevin Durant end up in Sacramento. That would be very interesting situation to watch. But yeah, Ravi, were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to say at the end of the day, I agree with you. I don't think the Celtics were really giving up leverage. I think that, our front office was just doing good due diligence. Such a good player opens up, you gotta make an offer that you would at least think is reasonable and fair and would benefit the team. They did that. I think that, exactly as you pointed out, Martia, the Timberwolves absolutely destroyed the Kevin Durant market by overpaying for Rudy Gobert. And now the Nets are now trade talks have died down because the Nets asking prices so much. They leak these negotiations. The Celtics are constantly in the news as the team that made it to the finals and didn't make it, have a bunch of big names. And they're just trying to create some sort of a market, and I don't think it's working. So,
yeah, I mean,
will they
exactly.
will they the other thing too is like you mentioned Amartya that I think actually maybe it was in Yearbon, but the Nets have all the leverage by, Kevin Durant's under contract. They could just have him refuse to play and not pay him. But at the same time, we saw how that worked out with Ben Simmons. Like, it's just an absolutely toxic situation for both teams. I think the fans are not going to be happy with this whole situation if they have their star players on the bench. Kevin Durant's not going to be happy. You're slowly losing leverage too, because the more time you have him under contract to, the higher his contract is worth, the more that you can demand too. So it's like a waiting game, but at the same time, I think there is a strong incentive to deal him ASAP, have this whole situation behind us. So I'm still optimistic that there will be a trade, some sort of trade, definitely in the next year, hopefully before the season starts, because it'd be a pity if we don't see Durant play, or if we see, I don't know, more of this drama.
Wait, when you're saying optimistic, you're optimistic about the Celtics trading for Durant, or just that he
just
ends up
any team
being
trading
traded?
for him.
Okay,
I think
okay.
that's a very I support the initial offer that the Celtics made, because I think that at the end of the day we do have to do what it takes to win. We do have to do our due diligence. However, in all likelihood, like you said, the Celtics are such a good team already. They don't need to completely mess it up. They don't need to sell the farm. Instead, there are other teams where the fit makes more sense, and those are going to be they're going to come, and they're going to make offers, and the Nets are going to get desperate because they everyone's just sick of the situation now. So
Yeah.
All right, two
So
questions, Ravi, very quickly. Question one, we know that Kevin Durant is under 4 years, so if the Celtics were to take him, we'd have to take 4 years of Kevin with probably around 40 million a year. So first of all, how risky is that to be paying 40 in possibly like 2026 when we don't know when you'll be 38? The second question is, this is a player who doesn't seem to get along with his coach very well. He famously, along with Kyrie, really refused to be coached at all by Steve Nash. Do you think that would how would that mesh with kind of Ime Udoka's philosophy and kind of the team philosophy at the Celtics, and really everyone listening, that we have that leadership in Ime Udoka compared to what he's maybe used to getting away with Steve Nash?
honestly, you do hit on some really great points there. Kevin Durant, we can all agree, incredibly skilled player, incredibly great player, but one of his major red flags is just like his ability to be coached, his ability to play as a team player. You saw, like as you pointed out, he totally bullied Steve Nash. He had Kyrie there. That whole Nets situation is toxic. If we traded for him, we could not give him the same freedom that the Nets did. Like there's no question. We would have to play. Yeah, we would have to make it clear that he is a team player, just like Bill Russell, a great player, but also made sacrifices for the team. He would have to do that, and if he traded for it, I think actually we should not trade for him at all unless we understood that he has to be a part of the team. This is not the Kevin Durant show. This is the Boston Celtics. So,
Oh, he did kind of do that in his defense. He did do that when he was with the Warriors, right? Because Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, like were there at the time. Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. There was already an established core of that team. So I mean, with the Warriors, he won 2 championships. So I don't think that's really going to be as much of a concern from my end. My concern is more like sort of his mentality. He seems like anytime things get tough, he wants to leave instantly. So I get kind of worried if like next season there's a point where like there's like they lose badly in the game, and then all of a sudden he's like sort of complaining a lot, or something goes wrong and he starts whining or saying something, and then Tatum and him don't get along. So I think that's sort of what more kind of concerns me than like the coachability thing. It's just sort of we've just seen it over and over again, right? When things got tough in Oklahoma City, he left. And I guess with the Warriors, it was a little bit of a different situation because I think he left because he didn't feel fulfilled with the championships he had in Golden State. But now in Brooklyn, he wants to leave again when things get tough. So it's just sort of this repeating pattern, which I kind of see, which I don't like at this point. Like Steph Curry in the meantime, right? The Warriors were in such a bad state after 2019. Like, I mean, they were the worst team in the league one year, but he stuck around there. He signed a contract, and now they're the champions again. Like, that's sort of the type of player I want to see. A guy like Steph Curry, who actually sticks it around. Even Damian Lillard, who stuck around with the Portland Trailblazers. So I just don't think Kevin Durant is that type of player. I feel like when things get tough, he'll demand another trade and go somewhere else. That's just sort of who he is. So I'm very firmly in I don't want Kevin Durant. Obviously, if he comes here after all, then I'll have to support him. But I am not in the boat of you need to trade everyone to get Kevin Durant.
I'm with you on that, Marta. I think you can't be selling your half your team, let's be honest, for one player who's now in his mid-30s. I mean, yes, he's still good, but you already traded, like I said earlier, a lot of players from last season are already in Indiana just to get Malcolm Brogdon. Do you really want to do it again for Kevin Durant?
Well, Ujan, I just want to quickly say, because we are already over the limit, but you mentioned the Malcolm Brogdon trade. Like, I'm okay with that trade because they just traded essentially the end of their bench players who anyways weren't playing much. So that's a little different than actually trading your core players for Kevin Durant.
No, I understand
want to
that.
mention that.
I understand that, but still, like even if it's the end of your bench versus like some role players or starters in this case Jaylen Brown. Like I just don't really see like, you know, these are the group of guys who are in the same locker room, whether you play a few minutes like in garbage time or whether you're the star player. Like you had this chemistry that got you the NBA finals. Why are you breaking it up in the matter of a few months afterwards?
No, that part I completely agree with, right? So yeah, no, I agree. So I think, wow, we are over the time limit. Does anyone else want to quickly mention anything else about the Kevin Durant trade rumors? Okay, I guess we are over the limit. So let's talk about our next topic. Kyler Murray signed a 5-year, $230.5 million contract with $160 million guaranteed, which is cool. It's awesome. Like, good for Kyler, right? But the funny part is there was actually a clause that required him every week to study 4 hours of game film. And it was actually removed after it got leaked into the public. So the Cardinals officially removed it, but it became a huge talking point. So let's just talk about this. So I guess I'll just start off. And I think it's a very amusing story because I feel like any player who makes it to the NFL and who has worked so hard, I would just feel it's like obvious that that player would do whatever it takes film wise to get better every day. Like if I was an NFL quarterback, you could bet your life on it that I would be spending pretty much any amount of time, as much time as I could give in a given day, probably like 10, 12 hours in a given day. I would spend that much time per day, especially to get to the ceiling. And I would just be studying film all day. Tom Brady famously said he actually is just used to just sitting, and now he's just used to sitting for 4 or 5 hours, and time just passes by so quickly. He doesn't even realize 4 or 5 hours of film has passed. He will spend the whole day doing film. So I'm just kind of shocked that the Cardinals actually required this, because in a way it kind of surprises me that Kyler Murray isn't already doing this at this point. That's just very, I don't know like what to say about that.
I think the part that's really surprising about this is that, I mean, yeah, it's generally something that players do, but to put it in a contract and essentially legally codifying it, what that essentially says is that if you don't study film, then you're in violation of a contract, and that contract is legally enforceable. My question at that point becomes, well, what counts as film from a legal standpoint? What counts as watching film? What counts as 4 hours? Does he have to clock in and then clock out and then certify that he's watched so and so films? I don't even know how this thing would even be enforced, right? Something about this, it just seems really, really strange. I mean, overall, I'm a proponent of film. I'm a proponent of using that as part of your strategy. I guess the question becomes like, why do they feel the need to put this in there? A, and also B, how would they enforce it? And C, I think it's just weird more than anything. Like especially for a player of his caliber to require something like that be done. I just think it's I don't know. It's strange to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this context, like the reason they're probably doing it is because they don't trust him right now, right? Like at the end of the day, that's probably why you would put a clause like that, right? Whether or not we want to admit it or not. I mean, if you're putting in a clause, that basically means you don't think that they're currently doing that. You don't think that they're putting enough time in film. And I guess making the commitment they made financially, $230.5 million over 5 years, that comes down to $46.1 million a year, which is actually the second highest contract, just behind Aaron Rodgers, who has won 2 straight MVPs, one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. So right now, you're basically giving Kyler Murray this enormous contract, and they also don't trust him, which is just very bizarre. The whole thing is just.
But also, if you don't trust him, why would you be offering such a big contract in the first place?
Well, it may
that
honestly
also
might
seems
just be.
weird.
So I mean, yeah, I think that's strange, but I think the reason they're doing that is because Kyler Murray is such a marketable player for the Cardinals, right? He's such a fun player to watch, and like fans love him. They love Kyler Murray, right? You can sell so much gear around, like you sell his jersey. You can do all of that with Kyler Murray. Highlights. He is such a great player. But I think at the same time, they're also just wary of his long-term sort of commitment if they didn't include this clause. I still am a little puzzled, but I think it's one of those situations where like finding a franchise quarterback is actually very difficult, right? So you need to find someone like to kind of at least put fans in their seats to watch the games. And I think Kyler Murray at least does that. He's such an entertaining player to watch, and he's a great player overall, but I'm just kind of puzzled by the whole thing. It seems like they were sort of hesitant to do it, and they kind of ended up doing it, relenting to the pressure. But it is, I agree, this is kind of strange to this whole situation.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think you made a a very good point in that you have to separate Kyler Murray, you know, the talent from Kyler Murray, the person. They almost have to extend Kyler Murray, the talent, because he's so marketable, because he's so much fun to watch, because it's incredibly hard to find a quarterback that talented in the league. Like, they hit the gold mine with him, getting the first pick, drafting him, and having him work out. They cannot lose that ticket. You know, it could be decades until they find a talent like that. However, they clearly, by adding this into the contract, they clearly don't show trust in his ability to, you know, pay attention to the game, watch the film, etc. Wait, let me finish.
Yeah.
However, like, you know, there's clearly some mistrust there. There is a reason why they would put that in there. But I think if I'm a GM, I'm trying to, you know, continue a 5-year long relationship with him. We want to win. We have a mutual interest in trying to win. I would not include this very micromanaging stipulation in the contract. It's just like, I think there's other ways to address it. Putting it in writing, you know, having these financial penalties in there, it really just like undermines the relationship entirely. Kyler Murray was totally right as disrespectful. I'm glad they got rid of it, but I think they've really just gotten this contract off to a very sour start. It could work out fine, but I don't.
What makes it more strange is that I mean, you, Ravi, I mean, you pretty much detailed, I mean, how great of an athlete Kyler Murray is and the talent that he is. I mean, if there is a trust issue and the management at the Cardinals decide to put this into the contract, I mean, if Kyler Murray is that talented, if he's that marketable, then he could just easily say, okay, whatever. Okay, if you're not going to trust me, I'm going to go to a team that does. So this seems like an instance where Kyler, despite that, the fact that the management would do something like this makes it even more puzzling to me. Especially given the fact that, I mean, you mentioned this, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you this, that it is really hard to find a franchise quarterback right now. And management would, it kind of seems like they'd be shooting themselves in the foot if they put up these barriers, put up these obstacles to make it harder for players like these to stay. Why would they do so? Maybe they just thought that they could slide it in there and then maybe he'll just fold over and get away with it. But I think now things are changing because, I mean, now more and more players are especially younger players, they know their worth and they know how to assert that. And I think that's definitely like good for the league overall, good for the players and just good for the way that their labor is valued overall. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, well, I guess clearly they've invested a lot in him. And I don't have that much to add in the avenues you're talking about. I do want to mention, I guess, I feel like in general, in the whole narrative of Arizona, I definitely feel like this kind of adds to the feeling that despite the obvious talent they have, not just with Kyler Murray, but, you know, with DeAndre Hopkins, they had Chase Edmonds, you know, they have like really good players. It's just kind of some questions about, you know, can they seal the deal? Do they have that extra bit? Because, you know, look at last season, for example, they started 7-0. Well, yeah, Edmonds left, but he used to be on the Cardinals, right? But they started 7-0 last season, then proceeded to like lose 4 of their 5 games, including against the Detroit Lions and later against earlier against the Carolina Panthers, right? And ultimately just knocked them down a wild card where they got knocked out by LA. And heading into this season, I think we again see, you know, this is a team that has all the talent in the world. I mean, we saw Kyler on his day. He's just one of the best in the league. We definitely one of the best in the NFC. So I guess it kind of highlights to, I think part of the reason it stands out is to me, it kind of highlights that question of, you know, what will it take for them to get to that next step? You know, is this something about discipline? Is this something about kind of the mentality? And to me, the fact that they're really inserting this clause really suggests that there is something that there's probably more that we maybe don't know about in this kind of arena. You know, maybe I'm sure they've had discussions, you know, like we had a 7-0 start last season. How did we end up in the wild card, you know? So I think that's definitely something that we're going to keep in mind going to the next season. And sure, it's going to be a chip in Kyler Murray's shoulder, but now the question is, what's he going to do about it? You still have, you know, the Cardinals offense and you have Kyler Murray. So I think that's going to be an interesting question.
I was just going to say that, you know, you say that Arizona started in the started 7-0 and ended up in the wild card. Remember one thing: the Patriots were the 1 seed going into their bye week, and they were 9-4. They ended up in the wild card. So just a thought there. But like, I feel like if it was anybody else, it would just kind of be the same headlines. Um, I think that Arizona has the talent in their team. For example, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green. I think Andy Isabella is actually not a horrible wide receiver. He actually made some plays in the during the well, I guess he's now with or actually never mind. But so Andy Isabella stepped up. They had Rondell Moore step up as well. So I think what was I going to say? Arizona has the capability to go perhaps even further. Of course, there's still the Rams. There's no Russell Wilson in Seattle anymore. So, and you don't really know what's going to happen with San Francisco. So they should, at the very least, challenge to be the division winner. Of course, hopefully it maybe, and then maybe what I was going to say is if they shouldn't have to play the Rams again in the wild card round, of course. I mean, as the 5 seed, but Arizona is, like I said, they should have a better record than what they had last season, especially with the 7-0 start. Of course, injuries didn't help them, but with Kyler Murray, he's dynamic. Fans tune in to watch his game, watch Arizona, because he's a star quarterback in this league. So I didn't really necessarily have a problem with him with the whole clause about the film. I just feel like, why does it have to be made public? That's the only thing. I mean, any other quarterback should watch film as to prepare for the next game, right?
Yeah, definitely. I also just want to point this out because I think it's not just last year where Arizona started off great and tailed off. In 2020, they were actually 6-3 and they finished 8-8. So I think this is like 2 straight years now where the Cardinals have had a great start to the season. I think they were actually 8-0 last year, but maybe you can double check that if they were 7-0 or 8-0. But they were, regardless, very good. They were the 1 seed and they kind of tailed off 2 straight seasons now. So it's just sort of a reoccurring pattern. And if you already know that he actually went on the record back in 2021 and said that he actually doesn't watch a lot of game film. So this is already kind of known. So if you know that, and then you also see that, hey, the performance the last 2 seasons really kind of like tailed off at the end, then, and also in the wild card game against the Rams, he had a pretty poor game by standards. He threw a pick 6. He played very poorly against the Rams in the wild card game. So I think it's just all of that the Cardinals took into consideration when they were giving him an offer. They were like, look, we love you. We want you to be here long term. But at the same time, we also just want to make sure that you're committed to being as good as possible as you possibly can be. I think that's sort of what kind of came in at the end of the day. They want him in Arizona long term, but they also want to just make sure that he's actually putting in the effort to make sure he's doing that. And they probably didn't feel that he was doing that as is, but they believe that he can do that. I think that's what they're hoping to do it. So I don't think that they're trying to like intentionally create bad will or anything like that. Like, why would you pay someone $46 million and try to damage the reputation you have with them or the relationship you have? I think it's just that they believe he can be a lot better than what he's shown over the past 2 seasons, especially how it's ended. So I think that's sort of really coming into consideration. They think he can be a lot better than he has. And that's why they put that clause in, because they didn't believe that he was doing everything he possibly could to get to that level. So I think it's going to be really interesting now. I mean, next season, as we already mentioned, like the Rams are still very good. The 49ers, I think with Trey Lance will still do pretty good. So I think it's really like 2 other teams in that division who are going to be very tough to beat. So, and also DeAndre Hopkins, who was mentioned, he's actually suspended for the start of the season. So who's going to be the number 1 receiver? Is it going to be Rondell Moore? Is it going to be AJ Green, who's 34 years old? There are a lot of question marks already. So at least now you have the quarterback situation resolved, which I think was very important for them to make sure you at least enter that season with that. So I think that's sort of why the Cardinals did that. Like, I mean, I think they don't believe he's putting in all the effort, but they believe in him. And also at the same time, they can't afford to just let him go and go into free agency, because it's just really hard to find a franchise quarterback. As Patriots fans, we were seeing how hard it is to replace Tom Brady with Mac Jones, right? I mean, even though Mac Jones is good, he's still not Tom Brady. So it's just hard to get a franchise quarterback. So that's why they really want to keep him in Arizona. But I think that's sort of the mindset behind them. But I don't know, is that being like kind of over simplistic? I don't know, like, or is that kind of like what do you guys also kind of think is the reason?
Obviously, I agree. I mean, it's always one of those things. I mean, if it didn't get leaked, who even knows how much he might have even cared about it, I guess, to be fair. Though obviously, like Ravi said, I mean, no one likes to get called out, I guess, but I'm assuming that if they've taken this step, they've probably had some dialogue and this has been an issue before. Because again, as you said, you don't just throw 40 million at a person and just intentionally try to like make them feel unwelcome or disrespected. So I do feel like there's more to the story that probably is just that we just don't know about. Um, but yeah, otherwise, maybe he'll just use this as kind of fuel for the upcoming season. Because I mean, yeah, they don't have DeAndre, but yeah, they still have. I mean, AJ Green's all right, I guess, but I mean, Zach Ertz definitely had a bit of a renaissance in Arizona after leaving Philly. They still have James Conner, who's still a pretty elite running back in the league. So they still have offensive weapons. It's just a question of can they take that next step? And really, they were 7-0 actually, so they did lose the next game after 7-0. But just like how can you kind of keep that consistency throughout the season? That's just going to be the question. So if that requires more game film, then I guess that's what they've decided is the path forward. I don't know, Ravi, if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I think I think you think that's a pretty good assessment. I think time is just going to tell with the Kyler Murray contract and how they deal with it. I think that this is also probably there's just a lot of media hype about this. It's a weird contract structure. There's previously been this narrative that Kyler Murray's lazy and he plays all these video games, and like you said, the Cardinals have a history of falling off in the second half and in the playoffs. So like Anirban said, could be just media hype and not this we're it's the off season, we're just blowing stuff out of proportion.
Yeah, I will say one other thing. This doesn't pertain to the film study, but this is going to be set up very interesting negotiations between the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow and the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, as both those quarterbacks have accomplished more at this stage of their young careers, than Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray hasn't won a playoff game in 3 seasons. Joe Burrow in his second season just went to the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson has won MVP, and he also has a playoff win. So both those quarterbacks have already accomplished more than Kyler Murray. And if Kyler Murray just got $46 million a year, I'm just kind of curious to see what Burrow and Lamar Jackson are going to be asking for from the Ravens and the Bengals. So that's just another interesting thing to note down the road. Like how much are these contracts going to be in a couple of years? So worth noting. But yeah, okay. So that's going to be this topic over here. Very interesting discussion. Our last topic, just the Major League Baseball trade deadline. Coming up on Tuesday, August 2nd. It always used to be July 31st. I thought today was the deadline, but it's actually August 2nd.
I actually thought it was today as well.
Yeah, I'm just used to that 31st, like those like last minute deals that come up. So just shades of that, I remember. But yeah, I mean,
those times when players would be traded mid game on the 31st and like.
Oh yeah. Or they wouldn't play that day, right? Because they want to be like available like for the team.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
all sorts of crazy scenarios, right? In the lead up to this, we already know that Benny's going to the Yankees. Of course, I remember Benny like pretty fondly from his time with the Red Sox, winning the World Series in 2018. Of course, he went to the Royals after that. Now the Yankees, they're picking him up. Of course, they had to give up 3 minor leaguers for that, but they're getting Benny in return. So I think it's a pretty good deal for the Yankees. And in addition to that, this is pretty much it pretty much feels like a one-off because he's going to be a free agent after this year anyway. So I think the Yankees are really betting that having this addition to the lineup can increase their chances of just like winning it all this year. And you can't help but think that the Yankees do have a pretty good chance. Barring like the Astros or any other team like that in the AL, I don't really see any other team mounting a serious challenge to them, at least in the AL. In the NL. In the NL, I think the Mets could give them a run for their money, but the Yankees definitely are the team to beat this year. And having not won it since 2009, I think they're really going all out this year. That's what the Benintendi stuff. But of course, there's other trades pretty much potentially on the docket, right? There's Juan Soto potentially go to the Padres or the Mets. I know there's some potential suitors over there. He's being paid like 17.1 million by the Nats right now, and he's going to be free agent in 2024. So given all of that, and the fact that the Nats are not potentially not really contenders this year. I mean, they might be open to moves. And of course, the big one, I got to say, the big one has got to be, are the Angels going to deal Shohei Ohtani? That's got to be the biggie, right? That would be the deal of the century if they were to do something like that. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, because if that does come through, I mean, this would be like akin to the Bambino trade. I can't help but draw parallels between the two. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on all of this.
So there's a lot to talk about there, right? So I'll first address the Benintendi stuff. Benintendi, I totally agree with you. Great addition to the Yankees lineup. They really traded for him to slot in where Joey Gallo has completely missed the ball. He's batting 160 this year. He has decent power, but he's just been so unbelievably inconsistent. They've been throwing in ancient Matt Carpenter in there to kind of.
He's actually been really good though. Matt Carpenter has been terrific.
He's an inconsistent player, but he's very hot right now. But I think long term Benintendi, or in terms of the rest of the season, Benintendi, much higher average player, lefty hitter too. They don't have a lot of lefties in the Yankees lineup, so I think he slots in very well. Regarding the other stuff, I think Ohtani, in this situation, any other team, pretty much any other team, if you have him if you have the opportunity to extend him, you do. The problem is that they've already extended Trout with a ginormous contract. They cannot possibly, keep both of them on the value they're worth. So they do have to get rid of him, unfortunately. It's very sad. I'm sure a lot of Angels fans are very sad about it. But at the same time, yeah, it's just gonna be it's literally I can't even imagine what he's gonna get. And he's pretty young too. Don't forget, I think he's 27. So, and he's such we've seen him this year, such a transformative player. He and Judge are really in a class of his own, and it's really him in a class of his own, then Judge, then anyone else. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about in baseball right now, the trade deadline and everything. But I think what you said about the Yankees and the Mets being the top contenders right now.
So what about the Dodgers?
Dodgers too. The Dodgers are just consistently so good. So they're always in the mix of it. The Padres too. The Padres in my opinion are looking like the leaders to grab Juan Soto. They have a great farm system. They have CJ Abrams. They have what's his name again? Robert Hansel III and Adrian Morjon. All of them have been implicated in the Juan Soto trade. They definitely have they're one of the few teams that has the talent for there. They definitely have a need in outfield, and they're the kind of team where they have a lot of these young players to begin with. They clearly would be interested in extending him. So yeah, I think, and the Padres are already such a dangerous team. So yeah.
Just one thing on the Padres, because I just wanted to highlight that. I mean, pairing Juan Soto with Fernando Tatis Jr. in that outfield, two players under the age of 25 who are outfield studs already. Having that is just you can market that for years. That's how you can sell to other teams that we're a contending team. We have two of the best young outfielders in the game today. So I think if I'm the Padres, I go all in on Juan Soto, because already the Dodgers are going to be really tough, and the Giants, they're kind of having a down season, but last year they were very good. So San Francisco's always kind of inconsistent, but they can be good. So I think if you're the Padres, you do what it takes to get past the Dodgers, because the Dodgers have shown that they'll go after anybody, right? They're not afraid to spend, and they just are loaded overall. So I would go all in on Juan Soto.
I think it's obviously no doubt that Juan Soto is going to be traded. After all, if he wasn't going to be traded, he wouldn't have turned down $440 million for 15 years with the Nationals, right? But right now it seems as though the Yankees and Mets, we might have a Subway Series, World Series. Let's be honest. Those are the two hottest teams right now. And having seen the couple of games from the most recent Subway Series, those definitely are the best teams right now. And that was before the Yankees got Andrew Benintendi. And of course, both New York teams are playing in hitters friendly ballparks, especially the Yankees, right? But the Dodgers are definitely in the mix. I think Atlanta is playing very good baseball, of course, with the return of Ronald Acuna. They have Matt Olson, right? And of course, they're the defending world champions, right? So there are definitely some contenders, and I think the biggest question is where would Juan Soto best fit? And like I'm gonna be with Amarta here, and I think I'm gonna say the Padres with just imagine him paired up with Fernando Tatis. That's
I
just
mean, I'd love to see him on the Red Sox, but that's not going to happen.
that's not gonna happen, especially in the form the Red Sox are in.
We'll say
But
this: if Dave Dombrowski, this is just sort of an interesting thought, but if Dave Dombrowski was still the GM, do you think he would have done the trade for Soto?
He might have pursued it. Whether he would have, I don't think he would have succeeded, but I think he would have at least pursued it. I think the current management just doesn't even want to. They don't even want to touch it.
Yeah. It's just kind of it's just like a very contrasting style, right? To Chaim Bloom versus Dave Dombrowski. Dombrowski just went all in on, like, he just emptied the farm for any player. And Chaim Bloom is all about preserving the farm system, which is, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea, but it's just kind of frustrating when you see other teams like the Dodgers, Yankees, kind of do whatever it takes. And Chaim is sort of trying to build something.
Well, maybe it makes sense in the sense, like in the sense that like it's kind of like pursuing value, right? It's kind of like a long-term investment that pays off over time, right? You're not going after these like flashy like star players, but by building the farm system, I guess the hope is that eventually after several years, it's going to somehow pay off. And that's probably how it manifests itself in the form of, oh my gosh, the Red Sox, they overachieved this year. And I mean, there have been several years when we said that, like, oh my God, the Red Sox overachieved. I mean, we said that last year. And I don't know if that's representative of like how this team kind of like rises and falls, but I don't know. It just could be it could be one possible explanation for what's behind Chaim Bloom's thinking here. I know he is a big proponent of like of like value, not overspending, just going all in on that Moneyball approach. Now whether it works or not, I mean, time will tell. I mean, right now it's not looking good though, but maybe there's a rationale to this. I mean, I don't exactly know, but maybe there's something behind this.
For the record, Chaim Bloom traded Andrew Benintendi to the Royals for Franchi Cordero. And I don't know if you guys saw those highlights he had at first base like a few days ago, but that's sort of the guy the Red Sox like viewed as the centerpiece of the Andrew Benintendi trade. So I don't know. It's just kind of frustrating to sort of see how this is sort of manifested. But that said, I mean, yeah, I think Lujan and I are in the same boat. Like, we think Soto in San Diego, that would be cool, because that would be cool. Yankees versus Padres World Series. I think that was my preseason pick last season, 2021. So maybe it happens this year.
Yeah,
I mean, I love to see something that's not a Subway Series or something that doesn't involve any LA teams either. I'd be fine with the Braves. I do kind of like the Braves, although I wouldn't want to see a repeat champion. But if but basically it's either the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Braves, or the Astros. Anyone other than those five winning the World Series, I'd say it's an extremely long shot.
What about Toronto?
Toronto, maybe. I think they can. I mean, they'll definitely have a deep playoff run, but I don't think they have what it takes to go all the way.
Toronto's so interesting because if you look at their lineup, they're incredibly stacked. They have and they're stacked for a long time. They have so many.
Like Vlad Guerrero Jr., man, like.
Yeah, they're in a great position. What they have, without a doubt, underachieved this year. I still think they got it though. Like, it's with baseball, it's a little bit about teams getting hot at the right time. They totally have the talent, so they got it. The other thing to talk about is that the Red Sox, they've been like kind of fringe on, are they buyers, are they sellers, etc. However, it looks like just based on the Trevor Story injury,
Looks like it's neither.
No, it looks like sellers. Are you kidding? If the Story is injured,
I've heard that they might deal JD Martinez. That's on the table. I really hope that doesn't happen, but I heard that that's on the table as well.
Wait, why? I mean, he's 34, right?
Relievers too.
JD Martinez is 35 now. Like, why do you want him to stay?
Well, because I mean, he's been a cornerstone of the offense the last few years. I mean, even if we give him up, I mean, you better be getting a lot in return. And I'm not sure the Red Sox would be getting a lot in return. You'd have to either be getting another star player, or even if you're getting like picks or minor leaguers, I'm a little bit more skeptical of that, because that's like really hit or miss.
And Christian Vasquez.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's going to be dealt, but I mean, he's been there for us as catchers. So I don't think that it's really worth it for the Red Sox to really shake up this team all too much, right? I think this team right now is underachieving, and right now it's injury prone. I think do anything drastic would be a knee-jerk reaction in response to all the injuries and the recent cold streak that they're on. Yes, it's been bad. I'm not going to deny that, but trying to do too much and trying to fix that by making some drastic move, I think it's going to end up being worse in the long run. I don't know if the rest of you on this panel agree with me or not on that, but
I will say this, like in 2012, when they traded away like Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford, and I think Josh Beckett to the LA Dodgers. I mean, that was a terrific move in hindsight, right? Because while it made them a last place team in 2012, it allowed them to basically sign free agents like Mike Napoli, Shane Victorino, Ryan Dempster in 2013, and Koji Uehara, of course, who got the final out in 2013. And that team won the World Series. So I think sometimes it's okay to like kind of move on from veteran players who've helped you in the past. I mean, it worked in 2011, and then even in 2014 when they were last place again, they traded away John Lester and who for Yoenis Cespedes.
Again, I'm not against getting rid of veteran players, but the question is, what do you get in return?
Well, for Lester, they got Yoenis Cespedes, right? And then from Cespedes, they got Rick Porcello, who's huge in 2018 for the World Series, right? So
I think Amartya's points also is like you might not necessarily get much in return, where you gain a lot of flexibility such that when you go into free agency the next year, you can pick up these players who you think are better value long term.
Well, if you're already talking about next year, that means you're basically already throwing in the towel for this year, which for the Red Sox, I guess it's not really.
I don't think we're getting very far this year. You said it yourself. Like you would be surprised if any team besides the like 5 or 6 you named.
I would be very surprised, but that said, I mean the Red Sox are only a few games out of a wild card spot. It's not inconceivable that the Red Sox somehow sneak in. It's unlikely,
behind
but
the Orioles though. So currently,
but the Orioles are good this year. The Orioles are good this year though. So
but we're in 5th. Like it's weird. It would be weird.
Fifth in the toughest division, and we're in 5th place, being 2 games under 500, and we're I think like 4 games out of a wild card spot or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty bad, but it's not insurmountable.
So you still think this team has a chance? They haven't won a divisional series all year.
To somehow sneak into the playoffs and get hot at the right time? Sure. I mean, anything's possible. It's unlikely, but hey, I wouldn't rule it out.
Well, I have ruled it out for the season. So yeah. But anyways, yeah. I mean, that's sort of our takeaway on that Major League Baseball trade deadline. So yeah, we've kind of hit our time deadline now. So does anyone want to say anything else before we wrap the show? Okay, so that will do it for this week. We had a great show, and we will be back next weekend to, I guess, talk about any trades that do happen in the meantime. And we'll talk about the latest sports news. Until then, it was great having all of us back on. And yeah, we're looking forward. It's going to be August, and that means September is just around the corner, which means we're going to have football season again. A lot of great discussion, a lot of hot takes for football season coming up. So looking forward to that. But in the meantime, everyone have a great rest of your Sunday, and we will be back next weekend. So have a good one, everyone. Bye.
All right. Peace.
Bye-bye.